Hello, everybody. Here we are again. Only three members of the Chop It Up team. I guess when I start calling this like a traveling trio. This morning, Michelle is off saving someone, and hopefully she'll be here before we finish. We do have our illustrious comrade, JR, Urbano Rebus, here this morning, finally. He's been working hard. And our man in the street, Barry, off in search of something.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start out with a bit of the protest recap. You know, I'm not going to say that I'm starting to suffer from protest fatigue. However, I am seeing an awful lot of protest stuff on the news, and it seems like it's just a never-ending loop. One of the things that I do find intriguing is sometimes there's complaints that there's not enough white participants in the protest, and other times it seems like people are complaining that there's too many white people. When are people just going to be people? How come we can't just say there's 5,000 people or 2,000 people? When are we going to stop drawing a line and separating ourselves? Everyone has a right and everyone has a responsibility to be upset about what happened to George Floyd.
Yeah, injustice is injustice, no matter what color, creed, race, or religion.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when somebody is in the news for abusing a dog, they don't say he abused a Chihuahua, he abused a Great Dane. They say he was abusing a dog.
A dog, yeah.
You know, and if they're talking about a tiger, they don't say where the tiger was from. You know, it's a tiger.
They don't say the single lead tiger was.
Right. Why do we insist on making a differentiation between people? It's a person issue. It's a human issue. Hey, Barry left.
Well, this weekend I was in Atlanta and Macon, Georgia, and I was able to say to see, and I can say that the crowd was all nationalities there, and both of the protests were peaceful. But what I did see were a lot of signs with the Black Lives Matter movement. And once again, I still believe that they're doing more harm to their cause than helping them by, once again, putting themselves in categories. As Barry was saying, injustice is injustice. But when you start to separate people, then that destroys the whole thing about having equal justice for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Talking about justice, I would like to move on and speak about something that is specific to the state of Florida. Lately, there was something that happened right before the George Floyd tragedy occurred. Governor Ron DiSantis has filed an appeal trying to block the right to vote that has been restored to convicted felons in the state of Florida. Now, this right to vote that has been returned to the convicted felons in the state of Florida is the result of a people's initiative. People voted on the ballot to put this amendment into the Florida Constitution. And afterwards, there have been so many attempts by the government to stop this from taking place, to stop this from actually happening. And in this time of financial responsibility, I find it completely irresponsible that Governor DeSantis and the legislature in the state of Florida are taking all these steps and wasting all this money trying to stop the people from getting what they want, what we want. People voted on this initiative. This initiative was passed by the voters of the state of Florida. And now the legislature is playing these games about little words that's in it. Is it this? Is it that? What do they mean? It's self-executing. If you're a convicted felon and you're done with your sentence, with the exclusion of people convicted of homicide and sexual battery, you are supposed to have your voting rights restored. before this initiative, for everybody who doesn't know, a person had to file for clemency to try and get his voting rights restored. The people of the state of Florida voted and pretty much elected to have these voting rights restored automatically for the vast majority of convicted felons who finished their time. And now Governor DiSantis and the rest of them are trying to stop it. And on top of that, once this measure was passed by the people, the legislature is trying to enact laws that will severely limit the people's ability to put initiatives on the ballot from here on out. What these people are saying, these legislatures are saying, is that the people of the state of Florida should not have the right to put issues on the ballot that they want to have addressed, that we, the people, want to have addressed. The legislatures are pretty much saying that the voters are too stupid to vote on anything. However, it was the voters in the state of Florida that voted these same legislatures into office. So now the politicians, right, the politicians are saying, hey, after you voted for me, you're too dumb for everything else. You don't need to vote anymore. So how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, they feel like we started suffering they started suffering some mental decline after the last election, and now they're no longer capable of making those decisions. And next they'll be enacting something that, hey, we're in office forever. You know, and it's not that far a step from dictatorship.
And the politicians are supposed to govern for the people. They're not supposed to govern the people. They're supposed to govern for the people.
Yeah. Don't worry, you got something else coming up that just recently you haven't heard because of the coronavirus and these protests. And it's down along the same lines, Roe versus Wade. Right now, remember, this is supposedly was already settled. Remember, we went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Right. And there are people that are putting initiatives on the ballot for the same thing. And right now, the bellwether is going to be a case that came out of the state of Alabama, the most restrictive case. And so my thing with that is you got to understand politics is a machine. And of course, most of your politicians, the separation of powers, and most of your protests or outliers are going to be in the executive branch, because the legislators are going to say we're going to vote this way or the people want to vote this way. But at the end of the day, it's still up to the governor or the president with the executive order to try to challenge that. And the arbitrator is going to be the United States Supreme Court if they elect to take the case.
Right. Well, the judicial review is one thing.
The people should be the last recourse. It shouldn't be up to the Supreme Court. It should be to the people. If we voted on this here, then the majority rules.
See, the Supreme Court is meant to be the ultimate arbitrator, because if there's an issue where the laws are being misapplied or where certain laws, we outgrow certain laws because society evolves. So when the physical elements that are involved in a decision of law are no longer applicable, then the law has to change. And that's where the Supreme Court comes in at. What I'm talking about is when the politicians refuse to accept the voice of the people. This is what I'm talking about. That the people of the state of Florida have voted to restore rights to felons, and the machine, the politicians, fear this voice, and they refuse to accept the vote of the people.
Oh, and here's another case is going to be the same thing is coming out. Not the medicinal marijuana, but the recreational. Now, do you understand that a lot of these cases end up in the United States Supreme Court because there's a conflict between the
state law and federal law.
Right. And it's specifically right now, anytime that the president of the United States decides that he wants to make an issue out of this recreation, even though marijuana use, even though the people voted on, especially out west, California has a big thing with the amendments, that they're going to challenge that. And right now it's still illegal. But here's to your point, uh, they're even going to challenge the point of having constitutional amendments.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest ones, it's a case a long time ago, but it's one of the ones that show it was during Prohibition era. I don't know if you're aware that it was like 8 years, 2 terms of the president, that drinking alcohol was illegal.
I think that was the 19th Amendment.
Right, but that was like from the beginning of 1900, it ended right after World War I. But within that 2 terms of that president, it was like 8 years, they had the same thing. Not all states came back aboard to the very end. It was like 1 or 2 states to the very end. But it goes to the very heart of what you're speaking, because the way the system is set up, even with this coronavirus and getting assistance and opening up or keeping the place shut down, every state has its sovereignty. Every state has its own constitution. And you want to make amendments to that constitution, it's all set up by voters' initiative.
Right. But see, when we get into decriminalizing certain issues or decriminalizing certain elements, there's always going to be a sticky situation. But voting, the right to vote, so many states already give their felons the right to vote. And in this case, it wasn't the felons that voted for felons to have the right to vote. It was citizens.
It's citizens, the felons were not allowed to vote.
That's right. Law-abiding, mainstream citizens in the state of Florida voted to restore the rights of felons to vote. And the politicians are bucking. The politicians are refusing to allow this to go through. You know, they're saying, at first it was, there's no specific language in the amendment. What do you mean? The amendment had the language. It's self-executing. Let these people vote. Simple. Well,
and then
what if they have probation? Is probation part of their sentence? Is restitution part of their sentence? They try to make a big deal about nothing, and when that didn't work, now DiSantis is, well, I'm going to file another appeal. But these guys are wasting money and wasting time. There are more severe, more important issues that should be addressed in the state of Florida, and we should be able to just accept that the people have granted us the right to vote and move on. But what they're afraid of is that when they limit the opportunity to vote, then they can control with less effort. If more people have the right to vote, they're going to lose their control. And especially the Republicans, because they feel that all these guys getting out of prison are going to vote Democrat.
Exactly.
That was the point I was going to make.
Which doesn't necessarily make it true, but that's the conception. But people coming out of prison also will hold them to a higher standard.
That's right. Because what they'll do is we'll get more prison reform on the ballot, and we'll get more prison reform voted in, because these guys understand and identify and recognize the deficiencies in the Florida Department of Corrections.
Exactly.
And I think that's another thing. The perception, always trumps reality in this situation. But at the end of the day, it's just the mechanism in place. And I mean, if you just go back 5 years and look at all these ballot initiatives they had, the other one I think that was still second to this one that was real close, and for the same reason, was gambling, Vegas style gambling in the state of Florida. And people, for the most part, people want it, but the perception is that if you vote for it, there's going to be a big wave of crime coming with it. And whether that's reality or not is immaterial to them, because it's like the same thing with this about the voting, restoring votes. Okay, let's just say that it stands and you have to pay off your probation and your fines or restitution, whatever it is. But for the most part, I would say the overwhelming majority will not be adversely affected if they keep those restrictions in place, because you would still have the right to vote and not be hindered by any restrictions. But they just don't like that concept. They just want to do away with it all because it's all about power and control, because this just happens to be ex felons. What about if it has something to do with senior citizens? And there's a whole bunch of senior citizens in Florida, and they become a voting bloc that they can't control or not
Well,
to their case.
speaking of the senior citizens, you know that a lot of our harsh laws, our harsh penalties, come from the fact that Florida is, well, once was a retirement state and it's a tourism state, because the voters at that time were majority senior citizens and retirees. So naturally, the judges and the politicians are going to cater to their greater constituency. Well, nowadays, the senior citizens are really moving down. You know, there's a lot more baby boomers, and they're more liberal and they're more free thinking in their opinions. So the politicians are still stuck, and the judges who are elected are still stuck thinking that they're serving the greater majority when they no longer are. The greater majority is asking for the doors to be opened, asking for less restrictions, and the politicians are still clinging to the attitude of the past, and they're not looking forward. We, as a society, we cannot move forward if we're constantly looking behind. The prism of evolution is seen looking forward, not looking behind.
And I think that has to do a lot with the way the system is set, the political system is set up in Florida. And because remember, it's a part-time legislature, and it's not based on. And remember, who was the old lovable Lawton Child was the last Democratic governor in the state of Florida,
But see,
and and they haven't had a Democratic leader in the Senate or the Congress up there in over 20 years.
But see, this thing is, I mean, I'm seeing DiSantis, everything he's doing. The Florida Supreme Court right now is erasing years and years of decisions without any redress, without any appeal, without any due process.
Exactly.
But like I said earlier, that's the executive branch. Again, that goes like right now with Donald Trump.
It's
That
not
is
the
why.
executive branch. It's the judicial branch. Look what they did. For those of you who don't
For the
know,
juvenile.
that's right. For those of you who are uninformed, the United States Supreme Court ruled in 2012 a watershed decision regarding juvenile homicide prosecution in the United States. In 2016, the Florida Supreme Court included juveniles who are parole eligible into this decision because it was originally for juveniles serving a natural life sentence. Well, because parole in the state of Florida is so flimsy and so it's almost non-existent in a real sense, that the Florida Supreme Court said that parole in the state of Florida is just as good as having a natural life sentence. So they included the juveniles with parole, 455 roughly, into the decision. And before all 455 of these juvenile homicide offenders could have their cases reviewed, the Florida Supreme Court went through a reformation and an upheaval because Governor Ron DeSantis was elected. 3 of the liberal judges were forced to retire. He installed 3 conservatives, and instead of the juvenile issue having the benefit of an appeal, the Florida Supreme Court said, well, you know, we were wrong about that decision, and now we're going to change
gonna
it.
revisit this. Yeah, because we appeased, they appeased the people who they wanted to appease. Now we got those people out of the way. Now we'll appease these other people by going back and just snatching out.
And they
so what's the stopping with segregation and integration rules and all those cases?
Right.
What's stopping to go back and say, hey, you know what? We really visited these cases from 50 years ago and decided that, hey, we really don't need to be integrated here. You know, we'll snatch all this stuff back. No,
right.
All these stuff we set forth.
And they masqueraded their decision based on a decision from Virginia, which, number one, Virginia's parole is consistently different from Florida. Number two, the decision that they based it on was not a final decision based on the merits of the case. It was a jurisdictional argument. And number three, there was no appeal active on the case in the state of Florida. It was time barred. A case is just the same as a criminal case. You have to keep it active. If not, you're time barred. You can't just file an appeal anytime you're ready. And this is what the Florida Supreme Court did. The Florida Supreme Court that has been installed by Ron DeSantis, the same governor who is wasting time and money trying to appeal a ballot initiative that was passed by the people of the state of Florida. And I don't want to get on my soapbox here and just point this guy out and say this guy is a problem. I have no choice. I have no choice. I have to. I have to say it.
But it's the system, and that's exactly what I was talking about with this abortion thing, with Wade, Roe versus Wade. Now that President Trump, and most people overlooked that when he was on the political trail, he said that he was going to revisit this abortion case because he knew that most of these Supreme Court justices were old, they were getting ready to retire, and so he put Kavanaugh on there, and there's a couple more. If he gets reelected, they're going to change some of these other justices. And something that they thought was settled 30 years ago is coming up to light. And most of these Southern Republican states, and case in point, Alabama has the most restrictive, and it's going to be challenged. But we have to understand that the United States Supreme Court does not have to take up the case. But it's going to be so decisive divisive in all these other states that they're going to have no choice but to do that. And so, for example, let's take the state of Florida with the case we're talking about now about the rights for felons to vote. There's going to be other states that are going to have the same issue, and most likely it's going to be a southern state. So they're going, if there's the lower courts are going to rule and they're going to disagree with each other, then the United States Supreme Court most likely is going to step in. And
because it's a matter of great public importance. Whenever there's a matter of great public importance.
And I think the most important thing, and it's most people are going to try to parade or masquerade this thing about being felons or convicts, or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think the United States Supreme Court is going to look at it as the people's choice. There has to be a mechanism where the people can
vote on an initiative. And and just to talk about the convicted felon thing in particular, listen, man, when a guy is sentenced and serves his time, the sentence is over. So, and that's another thing. They're talking, now you hear the stuff about George Floyd saying, oh, well, he was arrested before or he was convicted before. As if that justifies, what does that have to do with him being murdered because he had a record? So that means that it was okay? I mean, they stood on this guy's neck for 9 fucking minutes. And now they're saying, well, he had a record. So now, as a convicted felon, you're never going to get a chance to vote. You should never walk the streets because a cop could just choke you to death and say you had a record. I mean, what the hell is that?
So that's in essence saying that everybody that has been convicted of a felony, do away with the prison system and just line them all up and shoot them.
Or choke them.
Because they don't deserve to live.
Line them up and choke them and don't never let them vote again. Because if they vote again, they may vote against this law that lets us choke them to death.
Yeah.
And see, and that's another thing too, like more your liberal states up north, they went beyond that. Also, not only to restore your voting rights, but also make it possible where you can be gainfully employed, where there were restrictions, where you couldn't get a license and you couldn't get bonded, certain things. They said, at the end of the day, the court ruled in those states that once we serve our time, then we are returning citizens and should be afforded all those rights until we mess up again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But they're saying since we messed up one time, we should never be giving them rights again, which does away with whether you believe in the Bible or not about the redemptive story. Be restored. It's like being in time. Where do you think the word penitentiary comes from? The Quakers. It is, you do penance, it's a timeout, You do what you have to do in prison. Come out. Now you restored back to a regular member of the community.
Yeah.
Until you prove otherwise. But you're saying since we done it once, we will never change, and there's no reason for us to be restored all our rights as a returning citizens.
Well, basically, the way I look at it is they're saying that we're broken. They're saying that we're broken. They're saying that there's something wrong with us, and our judgment should never be trusted. We should never have an opportunity to have a voice in how the community is ran. What do you think, Barry? What do you think?
Can you hear us, Barry?
Yeah. Call came in, muted my
I was
meeting.
saying, it seems to me that they're saying that once you commit a crime, that you're broken mentally, that your judgment should not be trusted, and you should never have a voice in anything that goes on ever again.
Yeah, that's why I said it. Might as well just line us all up and shoot us, because once you're a convicted felon, you're pretty much an animal. You don't have any rights.
Yeah.
And in the media's eyes, you deserve to die because you have been convicted of a felony. So you deserve to be treated abusively by the cops, and you deserve to be killed at the hands of cops. And so why not just stop the cops? Why just let the cops kill everybody who they find committing a crime?
Now, I will say that I did see a video recently where several officers from several different jurisdictions have spoke out against the murder of George Floyd. And when we talk about law enforcement, just like everybody else, there is no blanket indictment. It's not like all law enforcement are bad. It's not like all politicians are bad. It's not like
not even the majority.
Right. It's not like all anybody is bad, and it's not like all convicted felons are foolish and evil and stupid either.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be seen as an individual, and we all need to start seeing everybody else as individuals as well.
Exactly.
And there are too many successful ex-prisoners out there in society, millionaires, actors, entertainers, all that to show this.
Look, man, Tim Allen went to prison. Tim Allen,
yes.
Home Improvement, Last Man Standing, he went to prison.
Yes.
Martha Stewart.
Yeah. Martha Stewart had her ass in the joint.
Yes. Yeah. But the point being, and I think
homemaker she was, huh? Hey, do you think they ever had to tell her to make her bed? Make your bed, Martha. God damn it.
They probably had to stop making your bed so neat, Martha.
Yeah, right. She was probably in the chow hall talking about making things better. Get your ass out of here.
Yeah.
But I think, and like I said, what we're fighting is the war of perception.
Right.
And until other people stand up and confront these issues, as specifically the people in power, that you do have some people that are making a political statement, because I'm pretty sure that if you look behind some of these leaders in these movements, pro or con, they have vested interest in the outcomes of what's going on. But if you look at some of their family members, I'm pretty sure there are some convicted felons in their tree.
Yeah, I'm saying there are a lot of convicted felons, and that trickle effect that they have plenty of family members. So you could probably tie at least 10 registered voters to every convicted felon.
Sure.
And so that's why they were able to pass that ballot. And so now the politicians don't want that kind of sway, because, like I said, once you suffered enough in any kind of situation, you tend to think a little more radically and a little more out of the box. And so they don't want you thinking like that. They want you to be mindless sheep. Okay, you just vote with party lines.
That's right.
Where once you suffered a little enough and you done suffered at the hands of the Democrats, the Republicans, the Independents, now you started like, hey, okay, so now I'm going to play your game, and it's who serves my interest best.
That's right.
But now I want to segue into another thing here, and this is where it really I want to point out where it gets real fuzzy at. Let's talk about the average Democratic cities that are breaking the politicians are breaking the law right in front of everybody, and people are cheering them on. Sanctuary cities. You're aware of sanctuary cities, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now and the reason why I want to it's more of a contrast. Now, in Florida, where we started talking about the voters initiative to have ex-convicts get restored their rights to vote. Now, this is a law that passed by the voters, by the people. The people's voice was heard on this subject. Now, contrasted with sanctuary cities where there is established law, federal, state law that says it's a crime to do X, Y, or Z, and the politicians are sheltering criminals. Can you see a difference, or do you think there's a difference between both situations?
Yes. And the reason I say that is because you have to look at what is the foundation of these sanctuary cities. And the foundation is that, for better or for worse, they're trying to protect people from mistreatment.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? The sanctuary cities is actually a human rights issue.
Stop for those illegal roundups.
Yeah, it boils down to a human rights issue. You know, because when you're talking about the sanctuary cities, you're talking about the illegal immigrants, right?
Yes.
Right. So these people who, now listen, they are wrong in what they're doing instead of being wrong for what they're doing, right?
Their intentions are good.
Right. Well, it's not, I won't say their intentions are good. I'm just going to say that their needs are just. You see what I'm saying? So it's a screwed up situation because we have to, as a nation, we have to first look after our nation. We have to have strong borders. We have to have services for our citizens. You know what I'm saying? It's like this, man. When you get to the party, you dance with the people who got you to the party. That's just the way it is. Doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. When I used to run softball leagues and football leagues and basketball leagues in prison, and it came time to vote for the All-Star game, I gave every player 2 votes for each position. Do you know why I did that? Because if I didn't do that, everybody who played for one team would vote for all their teammates.
All their teammates, yeah.
See what I'm saying? So I gave everybody 2 votes. That way you could vote for your teammate, you could vote for the dude who played left field on your team, and then you could vote for the guy you thought played the best left field as well.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Because you vote for and you dance with the people who got you to the party. So our American politicians are supposed to look after American citizens first. It's just the way it is.
And if you look at the purpose behind the sanctuary city was because of the illegal tactics they were using to round it, they were just racial profiling people and snatching them up. You know, it wasn't like they were getting caught somewhere doing something wrong, and then they say, "Hey, you're an illegal alien. Also, and we're gonna kick you out." No, they were.
I'm gonna say this too, man. Refugees from these countries where things are fucked up is more than a United States issue. That there should be a coalition of countries when we in the United States round up some people or discover some people, take some people into custody that are from these oppressed nations, other nations in the world should open their doors, and we should be able to spread out the people that don't want to go home and shouldn't have to go home when it's messed up.
And that's what Donald Trump was talking about when he said that the United States should not be their first their first country if they pass to the borders of other countries that have a democratic election.
Listen, but they know that America is the land of opportunity. Look, man, everybody comes here. Michael Jordan didn't go to Italy to play basketball. Michael Jordan didn't go to Germany to play basketball. Michael Jordan played basketball here. LeBron James plays basketball here. You know what I'm saying? Because this is the land of opportunity. This is where if you're good at something, you come here to do it. So I can't fault the people for wanting a piece of the American pie. What I do is I fault the fact that they're committing crimes to come here. Them being here is a crime, and we need order. We also need to adjust the laws that deal with the situation first. We can't change the way we deal with something and then adjust the laws later on and catch up. We have to change the laws ahead of time. We have to change the laws in a timely fashion. That's what we have to do.
And as far as them crossing other countries to come here, okay, so if I'm in Honduras and I cross over to Mexico, I'm in the same
It
situation.
doesn't matter. Listen, if you want a Big Mac, you're going to drive past Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, Taco
Exactly.
Bell, and KFC until you find the golden arches. So if
Yeah.
these people want America, they're going to walk through all these other countries to get here. And
Yeah, and I
travel.
see no reason for them to stay in a country that's in the same situation that they
right.
just left.
Okay, like the country I'm leaving is really fucked up, and I'm going to travel through a country that's kind of fucked up to get to a country that isn't fucked up.
But it is. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So why should I stop in one spot? If I want to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere. What we need to do is we need to refine our policies, and we need to recruit other countries to work with us, whether it be Canada, whether it be somewhere in Europe. But listen, man, everybody's got problems right now. Everybody's got problems.
You understand also, see, that once you start talking about these other countries, United States is basically the only industrial nation that does not have a federal ID.
Right.
And that is the purpose. Look at Mexico, even Mexico, our next door border, and I'm of Mexican descent. You go to Mexico, the cops stop you, you don't have that federal ID, you're not from that country, they kicking you out.
Hold on a minute. When did you start being Mexican?
Wow. But listen, anyway, the point being that but I want to bring it right back to the original topic we talked about. You see, sometimes is good. Some people have good intentions, but there's ulterior motives. Well, I believe it's the same thing we were talking about earlier. The politicians, whether they be Democrat, Republican, politicians by definition, they want power and control. Therefore, anything that goes against what they perceive to be something that's going to erode their influence or their power, they want to do away with it. So with this voters initiative in Florida, as Barry and you were pointing out, that whatever the citizens decide they want as an amendment to the Constitution in Florida, as long as it's in line with their views, they will not go against it. But as soon as they have a perception of threat, they're going to go, and they're going to always say that their intentions are good.
All righty. Well, it's almost quitting time here, fellas. So I got to go ahead and give Michelle's usual statement.
Yeah,
If you
close this out.
enjoyed this video, please press subscribe, please like, and please share. And if you didn't like it, well, sorry, we'll be back again, and hopefully you'll like the next one. And until then, everybody take it easy. Go ahead, Rebus, give us a goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Everybody have a good one.
Yeah, everybody have a good one.
Stay safe.
Be safe.
Stay safe.